One of the greatest rivalries in college football is officially dead, and everyone seems to be pointing fingers. Plus, several key Irish players have made decisions about their futures, and Marcus Freeman's name continues to be linked to a major job opening in the NFL. We've got a lot to get into on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame back in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the last 5 years. Thank you for joining me here on Wednesday, December 23rd, just 2 days away from Christmas, and we're coming at you a little bit later in the day than normal, but I appreciate you making this your first watch or listen of the day. And while you're at it, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So as I mentioned in the Friday mailbag, I've been doing a lot of traveling lately for Christmas, so I was not able to get an episode up on Monday, but I am back today coming to you live from my parents' home in Florida, and even though I've only been gone for a few days, it feels like an eternity because a lot has happened around Notre Dame football. Most notably, the Notre Dame-USC rivalry as we know it is officially dead, over, done with, and I've got plenty of thoughts on that. Plus, we're starting to see some significant roster movement as we get closer to the official opening of the transfer portal on January 2nd. Several key players on the current roster have made decisions about whether to stay at Notre Dame or head to the NFL draft, so we'll touch on all of that in segment 2. And Marcus Freeman's name continues to come up as a candidate for the New York Giants head coaching job, and even though we've been covering that on this show for weeks, I know a lot of people still have questions, so we will get to that at the end. But we begin with today's show with news that we all knew was possible, but we're hoping would have a resolution that unfortunately never came, at least not in the short term. The Notre Dame-USC rivalry, which began on December 4th, 1926, and has been played every single year, with the exception of World War II and the COVID pandemic, has officially come to an end. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports was the first to report the news on Monday, and as a result, Notre Dame has now set up a home-and-home series with BYU. The schools that were the first two teams left out of the 2025 college football playoff will meet on the field in Provo, Utah, in 2026 and not in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. The Irish will host the Cougars in South Bend in 2027, and we'll get to the BYU game in a moment. But first, I just want to say this. This is an extremely sad day for college football. Rivalries and traditions are at the core of what make this sport great, and yet every single year, the people in charge of college football seem dead set on eliminating them in the name of money. I love Notre Dame, and I hate USC. I have no problem admitting that, and I fully recognize that I'm biased. But even acknowledging that bias, I had real respect for the USC football program for most of my life. When the Trojans dominated Notre Dame on the field for most of my childhood, I despised them, but I respected them. Under Pete Carroll, they were the best in the sport. Did they bend the rules a little bit in terms of paying players? Absolutely, but they were the standard for a long, long time. And I wanted Notre Dame to beat that USC and reach the mountaintop. But the USC I grew up with is long gone, and it's been gone for years. I have no respect for what they are now, and the decision makers over there have no respect for what that program is supposed to be. Their current leadership, led by athletic director Jen Cohen and head coach Lincoln Riley, has turned a once proud program into a shell of its former self. And now their main objective is not being the best in college football. It's maximizing TV revenue while building the easiest schedule possible so they can backdoor their way into the college football playoff. And the signs have been there for years. But the most damning indicator that this rivalry was doomed came back in July of 2024 when Lincoln Riley spoke at Big Ten Media Days for the first time after USC joined the conference. He said, quote, "If you get in a position where you've got to make a decision on what's best for USC to help us win a national championship versus keeping that," referring to the Notre Dame-USC rivalry, "shoot, then you have to look at it," end quote. We should have known. We all should have known in that moment that as long as he was the head coach, this was the inevitable outcome. This is what Lincoln Riley does. Lincoln left Oklahoma after the 2021 season, conveniently right before the Sooners were set to join the SEC to become the head coach at USC when they were still members of the declining Pac-12. But before he ever coached a game with the Trojans, the school decided to leave the Pac-12 for the Big Ten for one reason and one reason only: more television revenue. It's been reported that Lincoln privately opposed the move because he knew it would mean a tougher schedule and brutal travel, but he didn't have the power to change the decision yet. And before the 2024 season, it has been reported that Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen tried for months to cancel the LSU game in the season opener, but to no avail. Ironically, the Trojans ended up winning the game, and it was their best win of the season, so it's kind of funny how that all works. And now we arrive at December 22nd, 2025. In the time since Lincoln showed his cards at Big Ten Media Days, and now, Notre Dame has won both games against USC by double digits, extending its lead in the all-time series and continuing its dominance in the rivalry over the past decade plus. The Irish have won 8 of the last 10 meetings against USC and 11 of the last 15 dating back to 2010. During the 2-year stretch between the time when Lincoln said that they were considering ending the Notre Dame-USC rivalry, Notre Dame has played for a national championship and has won 24 out of its last 28 games. USC, meanwhile, has won just 17 games over the past 2 seasons and still has not appeared in the college football playoff even after the expansion to 12 teams. But despite all of that, despite all the differences between the two programs, there was optimism on both sides that the schools would come to a short-term agreement. As Ross Sellinger reported, they were on the verge of finalizing a 2-year extension as recently as late November, just a few weeks ago, with USC hosting Notre Dame next season on the traditional post-Thanksgiving Saturday and the Irish hosting in 2027. But by Monday, it all came to a screeching halt because, as Ross put it, quote, USC officials determined that the game date was not ideal considering past decisions from the CFP selection committee in punishing schools for losses, especially those late in the season. End quote. USC essentially admitted they're far more concerned about what happens to them after a loss than what could happen if they won. They are assuming a loss, and that's especially telling given how one-sided this rivalry has been for a long time now. So much so that they tried to change course at the last possible second and push the game to week 0. And in fairness to USC, I will say this. I wish Notre Dame had taken that deal to play in week 0 of next year, regardless of the logistical and scheduling challenge it would have created. You can't say anytime, any place, anywhere, and not follow through on that if, and this is a big if, that was a legitimate option from the jump. Because to me, it feels like USC tried to pull the classic move where someone changes the terms of the argument at the last possible second just so that they can say, you're the problem, there was no, and the reason why there was no agreement, no resolution. Because based on the information that's out there, USC floated that idea so late in the process, probably knowing how little time was left for Notre Dame to make it work with their schedule, without any real expectation that it was going to happen. But at this point, it doesn't really matter. The rivalry is dead. The two schools released a joint statement saying they'll work to find a resolution as soon as 2030, which isn't exactly soon, but honestly, it doesn't even matter. The rivalry as we know it is dead because the USC that we grew up with is gone, and they have no one to blame but themselves. I've seen their administration spin this to friendly reporters like Dan Woken, Ryan Karchi of the LA Times, and others who relish any opportunity to side against Notre Dame. They tried to make it seem like USC just got word of the MOU that if Notre Dame finishes in the top 12 of the 12-team playoff, they get an automatic bid, and that was enough for them to change course. Never mind the fact that the Big Ten commissioner, Tony Petitti, agreed to this with Pete Bavacqua and all the other conference commissioners in 2024. And Nicole Auerbach from NBC Sports reported that every team in the Big Ten was made aware of the MOU back in 2024. And the most irrational fans and Notre Dame haters are still going to insist this is all Notre Dame's fault. But any rational human being can see the truth. And even proud Trojans, like former wide receiver Keyshawn Johnson, publicly criticized USC's leadership for making such a cowardly move, and he is certainly not the only one to do so. And to any USC fans watching or listening who are about to light up the comments, maybe they already have, I mean this sincerely. I feel bad for you guys. I feel bad that you are obligated to defend such shameful behavior from your school's leadership because of your allegiance to the team. I know that some Notre Dame fans would do the same if they were in your position. I feel bad that your once proud program is so far removed from what it used to be, what made it the envy of the entire sport, that even after hiring the coach that you thought was the savior, you now have to water down your schedule just to win a few more games. And if you still refuse to accept USC's role in this, I'll ask you this honestly. If the roles were reversed, if USC had won 8 of the last 10 and 11 out of the last 15, do you really think this rivalry would be ending? The answer is an emphatic no. And you know how I know this is true? Because USC dominated the Irish for basically my entire childhood. From 2002 through 2011, USC won 9 out of 10 games, and nearly every single one of those games was a blowout, and Notre Dame never once considered backing out of the rivalry. So whatever excuse you tell yourself to point the finger at Notre Dame, deep down, you know exactly why this is happening. You can yell about Notre Dame joining a conference all you want, but has being in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten helped USC make the playoff? Because as I understand it, USC has never appeared in the college football playoff 4-team or 12-team, while Notre Dame has been there 3 times and just played for a national championship. USC has won 1 conference championship since Pete Carroll left after 2009. 1. 2 programs, 2 rivals, 2 very different trajectories. And at this point, I can't even be mad that the Notre Dame-USC rivalry has come to an end because the USC I grew up with died a long time ago. Of all the changes that have hurt college football over the last decade, the fall of Troy might be the most entertaining for Notre Dame fans in the short term, but in the big picture, it's actually one of the saddest. Oh, and as for the BYU game, Notre Dame's strength of schedule just got better in 2026 and probably 2027 too. So, that's the end of one of the greatest rivalries in college football. But while the headlines are focused on the rivalry, Notre Dame has its own important offseason decisions to navigate, including some major roster movement. That's coming up next on Locked On Irish. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Irish with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonirish.supercast.com. That's lockedonirish.supercast.com, or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Gametime, giving the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. I loved being able to see the view from my seat before buying, so I knew exactly what I was getting. The zone deal stood out. You pick the section, Gametime picks the seats, and you save even more. Knowing prices include all fees up front makes the whole process stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And thanks to your support, Locked On is now the #1 sports podcast network. So Notre Dame has had some good news in the form of player retention this offseason and some bad news. Let's start with the bad news first, at least the recent bad news. Right tackle Amil Wagner has officially declared for the NFL draft. The 2-year starter and team captain is off to the NFL, and this had been rumored for a while and became semi-official when athletic director Pete Bavacqua mentioned Amil Wagner specifically while discussing players who were going to opt out of the bowl game, along with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, who everyone already knew was leaving. The question was really not whether Wagner would stay or leave. It was whether he would declare for the NFL draft or enter his name in the transfer portal. As we've discussed on this show, the market for quality tackles in the transfer portal is extremely lucrative because of basic supply and demand. There are a lot of teams who need help on the offensive line, but there aren't that many quality offensive linemen, especially tackles, available in the portal. Wagner could have made over $1 million if he decided to put his name in the portal and go somewhere else, but ultimately he decided to get his NFL career started. I think that's a smart move by him. There is a case to be made that Wagner could have made more money in the short term, as in the next calendar year, by going to another college team instead of the NFL, but I'm not sure how much more he could improve his stock with one more year of college football. And he's also been the one Notre Dame starting offensive lineman who has been blessed with good health over the past 2 seasons. He's the only Notre Dame offensive lineman who has started all 28 games over the past 2 years. Now, does he have room for improvement? Absolutely, but he's got his degree, and I just don't think there's much he could do next season to go from a late-round draft pick to a day 2 and certainly not a day 1 pick. So I understand Wagner's decision, and I also understand why Notre Dame wasn't willing to pay over $1 million to keep him. Yes, he's a captain, and yes, he's been reliable, but He's not Joe Alt, Mike McGlinchey, Ronnie Stanley, or certainly not Zach Martin. He's a solid, reliable player who could certainly help Notre Dame next year. But considering how well Notre Dame is recruited along the offensive line, they still have quality options on the roster to replace him for much cheaper. Will Black, the 5-star recruit in the class of 2025, redshirted this past year, but he could be ready to take a leap and start next season. I know the staff is extremely high on his ability. They could also move Gerby Lambert, who started at right guard this past season, back out to right tackle, where he played as a backup his freshman year, and then they could plug in someone else at guard. Matty Augustine is another tackle I've heard the staff is really high on. Will he be ready to go next season? I'm not sure. But look, Joe Rudolph has surprised us before, and ultimately, it is a blow to the Notre Dame offensive line, but it's one that they can recover from. A few other guys who are out the door: running back Jabron Payne, safety Jadon Blair, safety Tayron Benny-Powell, and walk-on quarterback Anthony Rizak have all entered their names into the transfer portal. The only real surprise here, I guess you could say, is Jadon Blair. But when you dig into it a little more, it's really not that surprising. Like Payne, Benny-Powell, and Rizak had little to no chance of seeing meaningful action for the Irish, so I'd categorize those departures as healthy roster attrition. Blair is a slightly different story, though, because he was one of the highest-rated commits in Notre Dame's class of 2025. He's the first player in that class to enter his name in the portal. Blair is built like a pterodactyl. He's like 6'5", over 200 pounds. He has an absurd wingspan, and during his recruitment, the Notre Dame coaching staff compared him to Kyle Hamilton. In hindsight, that comparison probably didn't help the matter because it may have created expectations for Blair that he'd see the field early like Kyle Hamilton did. And the reality is there just aren't many Kyle Hamiltons out there. That's why he's the best safety in the NFL. Blair is a very talented prospect with plenty of potential, so it's tough to see him go. But when you consider that Adon Schuler, Tay Johnson, and Luke Talich, Notre Dame's top 3 safeties in 2025, are all expected to return next season, and you also consider Ethan Long really impressed as a true freshman and may already be ahead of Blair on the depth chart, and you have elite recruits like Aiden Pouncey and Joey O'Brien coming in, playing time was going to be pretty hard to come by for Blair in both the short and the long term. Now, would you like to keep a player with Blair's potential? Absolutely. But in today's college football landscape, it's difficult to hoard talent because guys can always go play and get paid elsewhere, and I think that's the case here. As for the good news on the roster front, I expect Drake Bowen to be back. I just mentioned I expect Adon Schuler to be back, along with Boubacar Traore, linebacker Jalen Sneed, running back Aeneas Williams, and wide receivers Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse. I expect all of them to be back next season. That's 5 no-doubt starters on next year's team, 2 returning captains in Bowen and Schuler, and none of this is official at the time of this recording on Tuesday morning here on the 23rd, but I expect all of them to return. And there are still a few players who haven't made their decisions public yet, and right now I could see things going either way. Guard and captain Billy Strouth is weighing a return to Notre Dame versus the NFL draft. His future has felt like a toss-up really since the moment the season ended. At one point, it seemed like he was destined for the NFL. Then momentum shifted toward a return. But as of now, I don't really know what to expect. I would guess that he will not be back on the team next season. Could he improve his stock by returning? Possibly. But he also could hurt it if he suffered another serious injury, which would be the 3rd straight year. He missed a good chunk of 2024 after a lower leg injury against Purdue, and then he played through a lot of pain once he returned. He then played the game of his life this season against USC after suffering a knee injury early on in that game, but then he re-aggravated it late, and he didn't play again for the rest of the season. So ultimately, I think that injury is going to weigh too heavily on Strouth, and I think he ends up in the NFL draft, but I could be wrong on that one. Josh Burnham is another player Notre Dame would love to have back, but I believe he's at least considering entering the transfer portal. This was a surprise to me when I heard it, and it was a surprise to some other people that I've talked to as well. But if he's looking to maximize playing time in his final year, I can understand why he'd explore other options, especially with Bryce Young in the rotation next season at the same position. He was a player who I had really high expectations for going into 2025. He didn't take off like I expected, but he's still a very promising player, and the two are going to split time at the strong side end position. And I know that Marcus Freeman, Al Washington, and the staff would absolutely love to keep Burnham, especially after how well he played late in the season. So I hope they can make it happen. We're going to monitor that going forward. And lastly, you've got Christian Gray. cornerback who started the past 2 seasons, but his tenure as a starter has been an absolute roller coaster, to say the least. The highest of highs and the lowest of lows. The highs being obviously his interception against Penn State in the college football playoff semifinal game that set up the game-winning field goal. He also had the pick 6 against USC at the end of that season and the game-winning deflection against Texas A&M at the beginning of that season. But this year he struggled mightily against USC. Once again, he got burnt on some deep balls. And then, he obviously got beat on the deep ball to Jeremiah Smith on the play that sealed the deal in the national championship game in the 2024 season at the beginning of 2025. So I think Notre Dame would like to have him back. He brings back plenty of experience at corner, but with young players like Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and a very talented incoming freshman class with Kerry Adams, it would not shock me if the staff prioritized upside over experience. So that's the latest on Notre Dame's player retention, but the most important person they need to retain isn't a player. It's head coach Marcus Freeman. And with each passing day, there seems to be another report linking Freeman to the New York Giants head coaching vacancy. We're going to talk about the latest on that coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Their live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up, and you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. A couple weeks ago, the Buffalo Bills were down 21-0 in the first half against the Patriots, but if you live bet the Bills' money line at that point in time, you could have cashed out in a big way because Josh Allen led an incredible comeback and the Bills won 35-31. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Are back with Locked On Irish, and on Sunday, Mike Garafolo, a respected reporter from the NFL Network, was asked about the New York Giants head coaching vacancy, and he said that Marcus Freeman is on their list of candidates, and more specifically, that he is at the top of their college head coaching candidates. He did not say Freeman is their top overall candidate, but he did say he's the top option among active college head coaches. If you've been watching or listening to this show at any point during the month of December, or really if you've been following any reputable outlet that covers Notre Dame football, you know this has been out there for weeks. At first, it felt like one of those things that lived in the rumor mill, but then Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported on Saturday, December 13th, that Freeman was on their list of candidates along with 5 others. So I was pretty surprised by how many people were surprised by this quote-unquote news. Because Pete Sampson and I talked about it at length on this show 2 weeks ago, back on December 10th. And we basically followed this story every day since because people ask me about it every single day. So the one thing that didn't surprise me, though, is when Josh Pate tried to take credit for breaking the news that the Giants were interested in Freeman this past Thursday on a show that he does with Bussin' with the Boys, which was 5 days after Diana Rossini reported it for The Athletic. And look, I respect Pate a lot for what he's built, but that was so perfectly on brand for him. Anyway, the reason I keep bringing up Rossini is because she was the first NFL insider to report that connection. Before that, it was mostly people on the college side or people in the Giants, their media outlets and things like that, but not from a national NFL insider. But anyway, that clip on Sunday went viral, and then you had sites like On3 presenting it like it was brand new information when it clearly wasn't. This has been ongoing for weeks now. But now that it's picked up more traction, a lot of people are worried about it, and I get it. I've heard a bunch of different things on this over the past few weeks, but I'll say what I've been saying the entire time. The New York Giants are very interested in hiring Marcus Freeman, and there are a lot of Notre Dame connections in their front office, so it makes sense. That part is very real. However, Marcus Freeman really wants to win a national championship at Notre Dame, and I think he recognizes that 2026 is likely going to be his best chance with a bunch of talent returning from last year's team and also the second year of C.J. Carr as the starting quarterback. I fully expect Marcus Freeman to turn down the New York Giants and remain the head coach of the Irish next season. Will Marcus Freeman be the coach for the long-term future? Nobody knows. But when it comes to this report, I think the interest from the Giants is real, And I believe that Marcus Freeman has heard them out. Maybe he will continue to hear them out, but I expect he'll be back with the Irish next season. And I'd also expect an announcement coming shortly. That is where things stand today. We're going to continue to monitor the situation going forward because it's going to be the biggest story of the offseason until Notre Dame takes the field for spring practice. But that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. As always, thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, like the video, rate and review the podcast. It really helps the show grow and reach more Notre Dame fans. And by the way, if you need a last-minute holiday gift or someone keeps asking what you want, make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. You get ad-free episodes of this show, exclusive Discord, server access, and more. And subscriptions can be gifted through lockedonirish.supercast.com. So I'm going to have at least one, maybe two more episodes coming your way later on this week. So be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media. Again, trying to figure out a time and place to do this during the Christmas vacation is a little bit difficult, but as we know, there is never a dull moment with Notre Dame football. So until next time, Merry Christmas, enjoy the holidays, and we'll talk again soon.